Hello there, and welcome to another video on how to be using Linux. So in this video, what I want to talk with you about is about streams, stream manipulation, and stream redirection. Don't worry if none of those words make sense right now. We're going to explore what all of those things mean in just a few moments. So let's get started. Now first, let's talk about what are streams. So streams just refers to how your data flows within Linux. Now there are a total of 3 types of streams, and I'm going to talk about each one of them in details. So first, there is your standard input, or you also call it as stdin, your standard input. Now if you have done any sort of programming with C, then this is a pretty familiar term to you. But if not, don't worry about it. We're going to take a look at it in just a minute. So I mentioned that there are a total of 3 types of streams within Linux. Now before I go on to the other two, I want to talk about standard input. So standard input is just every single command which you type in your terminal and you press enter. So here I am in my terminal and I want to talk to you about exactly what is standard input in the practical sense. Let's say I give a command of ls-a, which means I want to list out every single file, including hidden files within the current directory that I'm a part of, right? Now, as soon as I press enter, this command will go into your standard input data stream. Now, before I talk about what happens once it goes into the standard input, let's look at the second type of stream. So the second type of stream is called as your standard output or stdout. Again, if you've worked with C, this is a pretty familiar term to you. Why am I relating these things with the C language? I will talk about that after covering all 3 terms. Now, the standard output is whatever results you'll get in your terminal. Let's head back to the terminal and I'll show this to you in practical terms. So here I am back in the terminal, and previously I just told you that this command ls-a, I press enter and it will go to the standard input, right? It will go into that stream. Now, what I will get back is called as the standard output. So let me just press enter and send ls-a into the standard input stream, all right? And you can see that I get a list of all these different files in here, right? Now, all this output which I'm getting, that is what I call as my standard output. Now, in one of our previous videos, I have talked about the echo command. Now, what does echo do? It simply prints out whatever string you provide to it, right? Let's take an example. Let's say I do echo hello world. Now, what's going to happen? I press enter, this entire command, echo my quotes and hello world, is going to go into my standard input stream. Now, once it goes into the standard input stream, there's going to be some sort of processing that happens. The kernel is going to identify that I'm passing in this command called as echo, along with the arguments of hello world. And the kernel will then figure out what is echo supposed to do. Once it does that, it will give me a standard output of hello world, right? Because echo is just supposed to print something out. So let me press enter and we get the output of hello world. All right, you see, this is our standard input right here, and we get the output of a hello world. Okay, so that's our standard input and standard output which we've covered. Now there's one more type of stream which I want to talk about. So the last type of a stream which we're going to talk about is called as standard error or stderr. Now, what is the standard error? By this point, I'm sure that you would have explored a little bit of Linux, either in WSL or a cloud playground or whatever. Now, at times you would have gotten an error, some sort of an error message, right? That error message is what we called as the standard error. Again, let me show this to you in practice. Let's take an example using the cat command or concatenate. Now again, if you watched one of my previous videos, you know what cat does. It simply prints out the contents of a file. Let's say that I try to cat a file that doesn't exist. What do you think is going to happen? Obviously nothing's going to happen. It will just give me an error, right? So let's try that. I'll say let's get a non-existent .txt file. Obviously nothing will happen because this file doesn't exist itself. So I'll send the standard input and I will get back a standard error. See, non-existent.txt, no such file or directory. That's my standard error. Now, before I talk about why these things even matter and why you should even understand what standard input, standard output, and standard error is, let's number these first. So within the kernel, each of these three data streams has a particular number. For standard input, it's 0. For standard output, it is 1. And for standard error, it is 2. Now, why are those numbers important? You'll come to know that in just a second once we discuss why are all these things important. So now that you know exactly what are the streams in Linux, the data streams within Linux, we can start talking about how to use them. Now, directly, just knowing that, okay, this thing is called standard input, this thing is called standard output, and this thing is called standard error is pretty useless by itself. This is where the concept of stream redirection comes into play. That's where this is actually useful. Now, let me give you a very easy example to understand this. If you remember in one of our previous videos, we tried to search something within a file. And in that, I used a particular command called as grep. All right. So it was called as grep. Now, what exactly did I do in that video? So I first catted out a file, which is simply printing out the contents of the file, right? Now I printed out the contents of this vimrc file, and you can see that it's got so many different things. And if I want to search for one particular word within it or one particular line, it's going to take me a lot of time. So instead, what I will do is this whole standard output, I will redirect it into something called as grep. Grep is simply used for searching for particular strings within a file. So let me show that to you in action. I can do cat vimrc, and then I will put in this operator, this pipe operator. Then I can write grep, and let's say I want to search for set. So I want to see every single line where some sort of thing is being set. So the string called as set, that's what I'm searching for in this. So before I press enter, I'll just talk about what's going to happen. Step 1, this entire the contents of this entire vimrc file are going to get printed. Everything that got printed is your standard output. That standard output is going to get redirected into this grep command. Now grep is going to use the output from cat vimrc. It's going to use that standard output as its data set, what it is going to act on. And in that entire data set, all of that text data, it's going to search for this keyword called as set. All right, makes sense? Now let's press enter and see what happens. There, it's showing me all of the instances where the keyword set is appearing. Now this makes it a lot easier for me to filter things out, right? This is important when you're trying to search for something, or you're trying to search for, let's say, your IP address within your network configuration files or something similar. It's also useful when you're doing some sort of shell scripting. Now within shell scripting, you can pass this entire output into a couple of other commands, such as you can pass it into awk, put in some arguments, and then you can do a sed to filter out the text even more. So let's say I want just this much of a word, auto write. So by passing in this entire output into an awk and then into a sed, I can filter it out even more and get just this particular text line of auto write. Over here, of course, it's not going to be all that much beneficial to just put in such a complicated command. But when you're working with something really dynamic, such as IP addresses, things that are changing every second or every minute, you're going to need something to filter out that exact thing. You can't just hard code the value of the IP address, right? Since it's changing every second or every minute, whatever. So over there, this kind of a thing becomes really, really useful. Now let's talk about how can you redirect the contents of a standard output into a file. Now let's say that I have this command, echo hello world. By this point, I'm pretty sure you know what echo does, right? But let's say that instead of printing it in my standard output, I want the output to go into another file. So let's just create that file really quickly. Let's call it echo output.txt. All right. So now this output of hello world, I want that to go into echo-outputs.txt, right? Now this file is obviously completely empty right now. Okay. Now, how do I send the output of echo hello world into this file instead of it printing in my terminal itself? So let's do it once more, echo hello world. And now instead of pressing just enter directly, what I'm going to do is I will give it this greater than symbol. This is called as your redirection operator. So what this will do is it will redirect the output into any file that I mentioned. So right now I'm going to just mention echo output.txt, and if I press enter, I won't get any output on the terminal. Let's take a look at that. So I just go ahead and press enter. I have absolutely no output because that output has gone into my echo output.txt file. All right. Now let's say that I want to overwrite the existing hello world text with something called as second world. I want to replace the hello world text with this new text called as second world. So I can do that in the exact same way. I'll just give a single greater to sign and I can say echo output.txt and press enter. Now let's see what's within the file. See, the entire text has been overridden with our new text. Now let's say I want to just append. I don't want to overwrite, I only want to append. So in that case, what I can do is I can do echo hello world. But this time, instead of giving just one single greater than symbol, I will give it two symbols and I'll put the file name. This simply means that I want to append. I don't want to overwrite, I want to append. So if I press enter and I check the contents of echo output, you'll see that I have both. Now there's an extra space here because I gave an extra space within the text. But now the second thing I want to talk about is the redirection symbol, which allows you to add an extra standard input. Now that might sound confusing, and trust me, it is. And at least so far, I have not found any use case for this particular operator while just using the terminal. It has its uses when you're doing shell scripting, but just as a normal terminal user, it's not very useful. But let's look at it regardless. So you already saw the concept of sending your standard output to another file. Now, what I mean by sending a new standard input is you use the lesser than symbol, and let's say instead of echo, there was something else over here. For example, let's say there was something like apt install something. You already know what apt install is. It's just the standard package manager of a Debian system, right? What this operator is going to do is it will take this command as an input and it will send it into this command. Now, again, I did say that it's a little confusing, and it is. And also, I haven't found any sort of a use case for this particular operator just yet. There is uses within scripting, but as a regular terminal user, not much. So let's skip that one for now. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is sending the output of a standard error to some sort of file. So before I show you that, let me just create a new file called error.txt. The error.txt is where we will redirect the output of standard error. But first, let's go ahead and create a standard error. Let's try to cat a file called as test. Again, there's no such directory, right? Now, I want to send this particular thing, this standard error, into my error.txt file. How should we do that? Let's try it in the same way which we did before, using the greater than symbol. So, cat test greater than error.txt. Is this going to work? It won't work. Why? Earlier, when we did this symbol to send something within our echo output.txt, we were sending a standard output. This right here is not a standard output. This is a standard error. So now if you want to send this standard error into this error.txt file, we need to specifically mention that we are trying to send an error. Now, if you remember earlier, I assigned a couple of numbers. Those are the numbers which the kernel has as the default numbers for those particular streams, right? So input had the number of 0. So your standard output had 1 and standard error had 2. So if I want to send the contents of this standard error into this error.txt, I will have to mention that it is a standard error and that output I wanted to go into error.txt. All right. Now it should have gone. Let's have a look. There, the error.txt has got our standard error. And again, you can do something like this as well, which will just append more and more errors within that particular file. Now there is one more command, one more operation which I want to talk about, which is the AND. So I already showed you the pipe operator with grep and all, right? So you saw the uses of this. Now the second thing I want to show you is AND. AND basically means run this command first and then run this command. So let me give you a really good example about this. We talked about how package managers work, right? Now, if you wanted to go ahead and upgrade your entire system, get all your packages to the latest versions, there are two things which you have to do with apt specifically. The first thing is run a sudo apt update to get the list of the latest available packages. And second will be sudo apt full dash upgrade to actually go ahead, download the latest files and install them. Now let's do them within just one single line. And let's enter the command just once, and we don't have to enter it twice or 3 times. So for that, I can go ahead and do sudo apt update and sudo apt full upgrade. Now this is just going to run both of the commands together. And if I press enter, first it will do whatever sudo apt update does. And next it will just do a sudo apt full upgrade. I can do these individually as well. But if I don't want to waste the time and I just want to write it as a script, I can just do this in one single line and I can expect it to handle the rest. So let me just enter this and show you what's happening. Let me put in my password. And here, first it's doing your sudo apt update, getting the latest versions of every single package. And after that, it'll go for a full upgrade. There, now it's just asking me whether I want to upgrade all these things or not. But again, I'm not going to upgrade just yet because that'll take quite a lot of time. All right, now before I end off this particular video, there's one more thing I want to talk about, which is /dev/null. Now /dev/null is like a black hole which exists within Linux. Let's say that you're running a particular server, you're running an Nginx server, and you're getting some sort of an error, which you can safely ignore. Now, if you can safely ignore that error, you obviously don't want to see it, right? So in that particular cases, you will send that output to dev null, which again is a black hole. So anything you send to dev null is as good as gone. It's completely deleted. So let's say I'm getting some echo error message of something and I want to ignore this error message. So I will simply send it to /dev/null. I'll press enter. Obviously no standard output, and the output or the error, whatever it is, it'll get redirected to dev null. I will not have to deal with it ever again. All right, so now you have a good idea about what the different data streams in Linux are and how you can redirect those streams and what's its benefits as well. Now, you can use this within your daily Linux workflow as well. And these are useful when you try to write scripts as well. So go ahead and play around with these. And if you run into any problems during it or you want ideas on how you can do it, do feel free to join my Discord server. You can find all the links down in the description. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something new from it, do drop a like and subscribe to the channel. And I'm uploading these Linux videos every week, and soon I'll be coming out with some new videos around Docker and Kubernetes as well, so stay tuned for that.